All right, welcome everyone. We're here to talk about HR talent. So we're going to start off today with some introductions and then jump into really what HR talent is or means. It's actually somewhat a new buzz phrase or terminology that Infor has. And then we'll talk about, why would you want to upgrade or implement to HR talent? Look at some of the user experiences, talk about how to prepare and plan, and then I do want to end, I always like to show just a live demo. I think that always is a little bit more exciting than a bunch of slides, and then we'll make sure we leave some time for questions. But Chandra and I will be on video here just for the introductions, and then we'll probably turn that off as we jump in. But Chandra, do you want to give a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I am Chandra Heron. I am the Director of Business Development here at Intellius. I'm actually based in Denver, so I probably worked with some folks that are on the call, and I've got a counterpart, Jake Michael, who helps our customers on the eastern half of the country. So nice to meet you all, and thanks for joining.
Hey, and I'm Allison Hoffman. I'm one of our Directors of Consulting Services, specifically over the application functional side. I've been working in the Lawson Infor space for, I guess, over 16 years now. Kind of had lots of different roles, started off as a developer, done technical lead work, application lead work. Most recently, a lot of my projects, I'm either like the data lead or the project manager. I have experience with both Lawson S3, and then most recently, most of my work has been within the HR talent system. Okay, and then just a little bit about Intellius for those that are not aware, but we are headquartered in Dallas. We have consultants across the country. We've been established since 1999, and we are an alliance partner. We started off just having some software offerings, some bolts-on software for the Lawson S3 side, but in the past, 3 to 4 years, we have grown our consulting services, in terms of upgrades, implementations, cloud services, really anything Infor related, we can handle. All right, so I'm going to turn my video off quick here, just jump into this. Okay, so let's talk about HR talent. So when we think about HR talent, what is it? So as I mentioned earlier, Infor seems to put out new terminology periodically, and I think this is one of those instances. Most recently, a lot of you have probably heard, the words Cloud Suite HCM. Before that, it was just Global HR. But really what HR talent refers to is just a grouping of Infor products. And we'll take a look at the next slide here that shows you kind of the core components of that. But Global HR, talent management, HR service, learning and development, those are kind of the main categories within HR talent. For those that aren't aware, payroll is now also generally available on a landmark technology, and that is now called HR payroll. So most customers, I would say, are still running S3 payroll, but it is now available if you're ready to bring that over with your HR talent modules. So just taking a look at this slide here, and to be honest, this is something I took from an Infor presentation just to make sure I had the right terminology. These are the two main components of HR talent. Now, sometimes there's also some confusion of what is global HR versus what is talent management. Historically, they've been used interchangeably. One's been above the other, but essentially these are just kind of different groupings of the modules within the HR talent system. Lots of different boxes here, so it may look like, oh, these are all different systems, but it's really one system with all these various modules. The core data and setup, which really is your foundational structure. So if you think about your jobs, your positions, your managers, all your codes and your resources, that's really all under that box that I have kind of grayed out under org and person structure. And that's really, what you think about implementing phase one. You obviously have to get your core in before you can start adding other things. Now, with that said, you could certainly do your core GHR plus talent acquisition, plus benefits, plus XYZ. And we'll talk a little bit later about kind of planning and preparing for an implementation. But I always kind of even tell Jake and Chandra, if you look at this picture here, I wish, we could make the boxes equal kind of the project size and complexity, because that org and person structure would be a very, very big box, where something like employee safety would be a very small box. But so just know that, a lot of times when you hear people talk about GHR and core GHR, they're talking about that, your resources and all the structure that go along with it. Okay, so why should you upgrade? Why should you implement? Let's look at some of those reasons here. So hoping and maybe assuming that, many of you here today are considering or already planning to implement HR Talent. So we want to talk through, what are some of the reasons why this would be beneficial for your organization? One of the first things I think about is the almost forcing of your organization to go digital through the use of its delivered action requests. Think of those like PA52 personnel actions on the HR Talent system. They basically automate your business processes. So things like hire, rehire, terminate, etc. Delivered, there are IPA workflows that, come with HR Talent for each of these actions. And we'll take a look at the hire action later, but a lot of times, well, we know in S3, PA52 is a form where a lot of times you're getting a paper form and then you're manually keying it in, and then you're doing some sort of approvals, et cetera, outside the system. This really lets you do all those business processes digitally throughout the system and have the tracking and have the escalations and have everything you need right there within HR Talent. Another thing that we've run across with S3 clients is they want to store non-employees or basically non-paid resources in S3, and that's not always easy to do, right? There's not a lot of flexibility. You have to use a lot of dummy values, sometimes convoluted processes, but GHR really lets you store any type of resource that you want. There's less required fields. You're not tied directly to payroll. So you have that ability to now store your entire workforce in a system versus just having your paid employees in the payroll system, plus maybe tracking, other employees on spreadsheets or databases elsewhere. And then lastly, and this is what the picture depicts here, is you're really able to define your org structure that's not tied to finance. Certainly at the person level, the bottom level of this particular picture, yes, you need to have people going to the right cost center or the right account and sub-account for payroll GL purposes. But when you think above that, you can organize that in any way you want. That helps with reporting, sometimes with some of your even technical work. You only want to see people in region 1 and below. So you can define this org structure, not necessarily tied to payroll and GL. All right, another reason is around the improved role-based user experience. And this is something we're going to look at in the system as well. But you can even see in the screenshot here that if I log in as a benefits administrator versus a recruiter, I have a very different view. So when I think about Lawson S3, I always kind of compare this to HR 11. There's one HR 11, right? Anybody who goes there pretty much sees the same thing. But in HR Talent, the way that the roles are designed and delivered, the navigation, really everything about that particular role, it's tailored to them. So if I'm a benefits administrator and I'm looking at a resource, I'm not going to see every single thing that's on that resource record because that's not important to me. Or if I log into the system and I need to go, look at my requisitions as a recruiter, I'm going to have that link, that button right there in front of me. I'm not going to have to navigate through a bunch of screens to find it. So all of these roles, the security, and then the navigation, this is how it's delivered. Certainly you can configure it to your needs, but to me, it just makes for such a better experience when out of the box, you're starting with just seeing the things you need to see, just seeing the actions you need for your job or your particular role. There's also a lot of embedded analytics. So for those that haven't, seen HR Talent, a lot of it is list views and things that you can quickly just export directly into CSV format. You can modify those list views. If you're missing a field, you can use the configuration console tool to do that. What's great about this, and of course, there's also like a query upload tool in for Spreadsheet Designer, which is very similar to Lawson add-ins. But what's nice about this kind of real-time ability to just get data from the system is we've seen clients have, 200 plus reports. And when we really dig down into, okay, after you understand how to use the system and you can pull out this data yourself, how many reports do you really need? We've gotten a lot of client, 20 or less, and that's so certainly there's still the whole reporting, burst functionality, analytics, etc. But when you just think about pure data and your current list of reports, I would say not many times, all the time, that gets really pared down and puts a lot of the ownership into the user's hands, which is a great thing. They don't have to go through an LBI report or go to IT and ask for a report. They can just pull all this data themselves. A feature I do like to call out when I talk about HR Talent is the auto user provisioning. I wouldn't say this is new, but it certainly wasn't there a couple of years ago. But really, there's just a couple screens, a few simple steps. You configure the system and you can say, okay, I want to assign these standard roles on a hire or rehire action. Or you can quickly disable an actor or a user on terminate. So I know many times clients have some robust auto user provisioning IPA that they've built to make sure people are going in and out of the right roles. A lot of that can go away and you can just use the system functionality. And then just to touch on the last two, so mobile enabled. Mobile enabled is certainly not an afterthought when it comes to HR Talent. Mobile is part of the design, part of what Infor has built. So it just kind of goes hand in hand. We know today's world, most people are on their phone all the time. So yes, a lot of your work will happen on a computer, sitting at your desk. But when we think about employees and managers, maybe approving something or going and doing a name change or whatever it might be, that is all there and available to them. And then lastly, there's just true talent management functionality. If we think back to the slide earlier, there were modules around performance and goals, succession planning, different things like that, where I sort of think of Lawson S3 as just the system to get people paid, right? Where now you have a true talent management system that, really allows you to grow and better your workforce. Oops, lost my mouse here. Okay, so now let's talk about some of those enhanced user experiences I mentioned before. These are kind of the three areas I thought of when I was thinking about, just I'll say the differences in not only Lawson S3, but just other HR systems, right? Versus now this system really built for the end user. And the first, of course, is our employees and our managers. So we'll take a look in the system in a bit here at employee and manager space, but it's just part of implementing HR talent. It's not a matter of, well, we've got core HR in, maybe we should toggle on employee self-service. No, like this is just part of the processes, part of what you design and build. And that really pushes the ownership to the employees and the managers, which is a good thing. Sometimes not always a good thing if they're updating data, maybe you don't want them to, but again, that's all configurable, but it takes that, all the work off of, let's say, a generalist or an HRIS department or a help desk or whatever it might be, having employees call them and saying, I need to do XYZ, I need to change this data. Now you can just push your employees, to the employee space portal and have them do whatever data updates are needed. So they really have control of their own data. They can see their data so they know if it's incorrect. And then as a manager, you can, of course, see your team's data. The other user experience items I think about are around benefits. So yes, there's open enrollment. Yes, there are life events in Lawson S3, but many times that seems a little bit cumbersome, manual. It's hard to kind of tailor that to your organization's needs. And we're going to look at this specifically when we go into the demo of just how an employee would go through like a marriage life event, and how it just kind of seamless and easy it is. And the way that all this is built too is you don't need a lot of instructions. It's pretty intuitive. We know today everything cloud-based, we log into our phone, we go to a website, things look different every day. And Infor being similar with its, pushing out updates every month, but they make it so that as an employee specifically, you're not confused about where you're going. And even in my recent implementation, we had a lot of good feedback from the end users that got pulled in during user acceptance tests. So they were no part of design, really no part of the project up until that point. Were given very little direction because we wanted to see how they would react as just a pure employee, and the feedback was all really good. This is easy to use, it's easy to understand, and etc. So you'll get a lot of that feedback and experience as well for your employees, as you roll out some of this self-service functionality. And then lastly, our generalists. So this goes back to automating those personal actions. And I kind of picked on the generalist. I guess it could vary across organizations, but again, now that there's the ability to initiate these in the system and have approvals and have people see the data throughout each approval, part of the process, and not having to just do data entry and hoping you got it right. This really just automates that process and brings more people into the process, which I think is good. It takes the onus off of just one group of people to get it in and get it right and make sure everyone agrees with it, etc. So speaking of, and I know this is teeny tiny, so we'll look at some of this in the system too, but just wanted to kind of outline, this is an example of how a hire would work out of the box. So the generalist would go into their generalist menu and they would click hire a resource and a form would pop up. And that's what we'll look at. So you can see it this bigger in the system. But the main gist is they fill in that form, whatever information they are aware of. It then gets routed to the manager who sees this in their in basket. So for those of you that are familiar with IPA, you understand the terminology in basket. So in this case, Sally Myers, has a hire resource action out there for her to review. She can add data, she can change data, she can do whatever she needs to do. And And then she hits submit and it goes to the HR administrator and they perform that final approval. And again, they go to their administrator in basket, they find the hire action and they do what they need to do. And once they hit that final submit button, then the resource is created in the system. So these are all delivered, for each type of action. And this just happens to be the routing flow for hire. But this is, again, all configurable. So you can, again, for those that know IPA, you can change your routings within IPA. You can also use Configuration Console to change the actual fields on the forms that you see here. So let's say there's some fields you're just never going to use it as an organization. You do not want people to get confused by them or fill them out. You can just hide them. Or maybe there's some values you always want defaulted. You can go ahead and default them. So that's all part of the design process and figuring out what's the right routing and what of the delivered fields that Infor provides on these forms, what do we really want to show to the person that's doing the approval. And then the bottom, I just put a quick snippet. Of course, with IPA and workflow, you can always send out emails. So that's just an example of a delivered email. After the generalist initiates, the manager gets an email that says, hey, you have something in your in-basket to approve. Okay, so let's talk about how to prepare and plan. So obviously data is a huge part of any large implementation. So the first thing that I always think about looking at is your position and your supervisor structure. So some questions maybe to ask yourself are, do you actually have true position management today? Or do you just have a bunch of code sitting out there? Or maybe some clients don't even use positions yet. They're still just using jobs. And then if you do have some kind of structure, is it accurate? Now, if anyone's using manager self-service, typically your structure is accurate because that's what's driving, who reports to who from the manager self-service perspective. But again, some clients just have a bunch of HR07 records and there's really no hierarchy. So in HR Talent, you really need, it forces you to have a position and supervisor structure. It has to be defined. So the more you can do ahead of time to kind of prepare for that, the better. You can see from the screenshot, this supervisor structure is built out based on the positions that people are sitting in. And you may have some positions that are vacant, in this case, the SVP of HR, and that's okay. But you just want to have that structure in place because you want to make sure that your reporting relationships are correct. If we think back to that hire action I just showed, it was going up to the next manager. So we want to make sure that when we're doing workflows and things that you've got this structure in place so that things are going to the right people. Okay. Oops. Code cleanup. A lot of times people have been on their legacy HR system for so many years that they just have code sitting out there that they no longer use. And activate those. We're not saying delete them or anything, but the more you can have this type of data cleaned up, it just makes the data configuration in HR Talent that much easier and better. And certainly a lot of this stuff crops up when you're actually going through the implementation too. But again, if you've got messy tables out there, old things that are never used, it's good to go out and just start looking at them. Not always the most common, but many times we do see clients that have multiple legacy or source systems. Especially if, I think of like healthcare, and if you have different hospitals or you've been doing acquisitions and, each group or hospital maybe has their own system today, you want to start looking at where is their employee overlap. Do you have do you have an active person in two systems, or are they active in one and termed in the other? And also the codes themselves. So when we think about the foundational data, your organization units, your locations, your positions, your job codes, starting to look at some of that and trying to standardize or determine, okay, it's going to be system XYZ. That's really what we're going to pull from for this type of information, and everyone else is going to adhere to that. So just starting to think about that is always a good thing to do ahead of time. Certainly part of the implementation is, having us help you analyze that and understand where all this data actually lives in HR Talent. But again, the more you can standardize and consolidate ahead of time, the better those discussions will be. And then lastly, your business processes. So when we come in and help you implement this, one of the first things that we do is we want to understand what you do today. We're not in any way saying that we're going to just do what you do today and plug it into HR Talent, but the more we understand your business processes, the better we can design and define your business processes within HR Talent. So if you have any documentation you need to gather, or if you have no documentation, because maybe you've got someone that's been in that role for 15 years that just does what they need to do, starting to gather some of that is always a good thing. Because the quicker that we as the consultants can understand your current state, the quicker we can get to that future state in HR Talent. And then one other thing to think about with regards to HR is just, do you have a centralized HR service center, or are you going to have local data entry at each location or each branch or each whatever it might be? Answers to those questions, and certainly we can talk through that with you as well, but we need to have some of those answers before we start designing all of your business processes, because that could make a big difference in how the routing works and all the different actions and how we set up some of the filtering and just different things like that. So just some other things to think about. Okay, and then of course, from the technical side, I'm sure, I don't think we've ever found a client that has no customizations in their current system. But the good thing is, this is all part of it, and we've yet to find something that was built in legacy that we can't replicate or come up with a solution for within HR Talent. Most of this work is going to be done via configuration console and or Infor process automation. Also now, I guess I should have listed here, the newer file creation utility tool is used for a lot of outbound interfaces. But there's lots of extensibility tools that are used within the landmark technology. So really what we do is we start with your list or your RICE of all your reports and interfaces and what conversions you need, what extensions or customizations you have, and we figure out, okay, how does that fit into the future world? Many times we find that because of HR Talent's more robust functionality, some of those customizations just go away because the functionality already exists. Other times we do need to use IPA or config console to, kind of rewrite some of this stuff. But in speaking with developers and those that have done this work, it's just so much quicker. We think about COBOL, and yes, COBOL was great and stable and led us through Lawson S3, but some of that stuff took a while to write, where within configuration console, you can really get to that end result faster than writing some 500-line COBOL program. So this is all part of it as well, and something that you can do as a customer to prepare would be, starting to get this list ready. What are all of your customizations that you have today in your system? All right, so now let's talk about planning your implementation. Just a few final notes here. So when you start to create that roadmap and kind of plot out how your organization will implement these modules, and we don't want to forget the change management that goes with it, the training, all that type of stuff. here's just a few things to think about. So, and you know, we have to throw these numbers out there, but of course it varies per client, but we say about 8 months just to implement that core GHR functionality where we talked about the people, the structure. It's just so critical that you get that right. You really don't want to rush that. We've seen some clients just want to get to the end result of maybe some kind of talent management module that they rush through to get core HR in, and they miss some things, and because they're just trying to go so fast. So it is important to spend the time up front to get your core functionality in and stable. Now this says 8 to 12 months because if you maybe you want to do core GHR plus talent acquisition plus benefits, you know, all within phase 1, then of course you're going to be adding on a little bit more time and effort. But really, once that core structure is in place, you can then implement any module we saw listed on that earlier slide with all the different boxes. What we typically, and again, this is more just very generic without knowing the customer, but just kind of thinking, you obviously want to start with the core GHR and then phase in the different talent management and other GHR modules. But as I just mentioned, you can certainly pair core GHR with other modules during phase 1. Absence and benefits, a lot of times we say, you know, keep that with payroll because it's so tied, but we've also seen customers take benefits over to HR Talent while payroll is still in S3. There's certainly interfaces involved, but what they gained from that was too big to not do it. For example, they had no open enrollment portal that they use today, so they were outsourcing that. So to have the ability for their employees, you know, to go through open enrollment on Infor and, you know, just use their own systems was just a huge win for them. So I think every client is different. Obviously, Intellius, we're happy to talk through your current situation and really help you create the roadmap. And, you know, even those conversations change over time. It was a very different conversation when payroll was not yet available in Landmark. Now that it's available, that changes things. And that, you know, that'll just continue to happen. And we always keep up with, you know, what Infor's approach and current scenery looks like. And that, you know, that's really what helps you understand what is the best approach for your company. Okay, so let's now, enough of me and slides. Let's take a look in the system at a couple things. So let me pull up. The first thing I want to talk about for those that just really haven't seen the system a lot is kind of back to that role-based security, role-based navigation I talked about. I'm in now as the employee role. So what I'm seeing here are things that are very specific to an employee. If I want to see my company holidays, if I want to look at my profile, I can come out here and see different things. So it really, to me, and again, enables the employee. And I feel like, you know, this is the world we live in now. We want to know what data is out there about us. And, you know, this is different than, of course, Googling ourselves, but we want to see, okay, is my information correct out here? Or, you know, if things have changed, I can go in and change them. You can see obviously just kind of like your personal information. You can add emergency contacts, addresses, dependents, all this different stuff. Now, this too, from a organization perspective, can be configured. Maybe you don't even do anything with travel documents or property, so you don't even want employees to see that. You can certainly use config console and just hide those sections. So when you're going through the implementation, you want to think about what functionality do I want to push out to employees and managers, and you may want to hide some of these links and then just kind of open them up as you go through different future projects. So this is what it looks like for an employee, but then let's say I'm actually a generalist. Now, in this case, the user I'm logged in as has access to all the different roles. You would obviously make sure that you're only giving employees the employee role, or your benefits administrators, they would probably have a benefits role and an employee role. But just, these are all the different delivered roles that do exist. So as a generalist, I'm going to see very different things, right? I'm obviously going to be working with the resources a lot. So that's a quick link. Again, these are configurable. You want to put the things up here that are going to kind of biggest bang for the buck, right? If I'm a generalist and I'm in the system every day, what types of actions and tasks am I working through? And let's make sure that that is 1 click versus 3 clicks for them. But I can look at all my employees from here. I can also do, as a generalist, quite a bit of setup. So you'll see, all these different menu items for the different modules. The one thing I did want to look at real quick kind of goes back to the hire action. So if you remember the slide that had kind of the Visio flow and the teeny tiny screenshots, this is how I would start a hire. So I'd go in as a generalist, I would go into the system, go to resources, and then hire a resource. And we'll see in a minute here that screen pop up that was small on the screenshot. So you can see this is a delivered form for request to hire a resource. Lots of different fields, some required, some not. But again, you have the ability to hide things if you're never going to use legacy employment number. So basically the generalist would fill out what they know about the request to hire a resource, hit the submit button, all that information would then flow to the manager. And when the manager opens up their form, it would look very, very similar, but it would have the information filled in, and then they would make the changes. So that's how all those action requests or personnel actions work. Different people are the initiators, so you'll find where you kind of trigger that from in different places in the system. But again, it typically is very intuitive. In this case, it's for the generalist just to go to resources, hire a resource. So hopefully you can and then I guess I'll look at one more role. Let's just look at the benefits administrator. Very different items than what you saw for the generalist. A lot of these down here are the jobs that you need to run every day, plan setup, etc. So very, very tailored to each role, and also configurable, because I don't think one thing fits all customers. But for the most part, this is a great place to start and have each of your different groups of people have that tailored look and feel for them. So the other thing I want to look at is, if we jump back to the employee view, I talked a little bit about open enrollment and life events and just kind of the employee experience for that, which I think is a big win when implementing benefits. So I'm now in as an employee again. And if I go to kind of my benefits section, I just want to walk through a few things here. So the first thing I'm able to see as an employee is, what are my current benefits? What am I currently enrolled in? In this case, this guy just has an employer-paid long-term disability and a medical copay plan. I can see that he's associate only. Here's my different amounts. So this is more just kind of a view of what you have today. There's really no actions to take from here. Dependents and beneficiaries. So what we're going to go through here is a marriage life event. So what I've done ahead of this is made sure that I put his spouse in. This is where you can manage your dependents and beneficiaries and make sure that your beneficiaries are attached to the correct benefit plan. And then I'm going to skip life events for a second and jump down to benefits information. This is where you can house all of your actual benefit documentation. So in this case, we've just loaded one thing up here for Blue Cross Blue Shield, but you can put documents in, you can put links so that it takes the people right to the website. I know a lot of clients sometimes, just email this out to their associates or have some kind of internal SharePoint site where they are, keeping this updated. To me, this is nice because as the employee, it's all right here for me. If, I would think you'd probably have more than just one, unless you just have one vendor. But this is where you can post all that documentation and, just different information on the actual benefit plans that you offer. Okay, so let's look at life events. So I don't have any right now, but I'm going to go ahead and add a marriage life event. There'll be a drop down. I'll just say I got married last weekend. Again, this is me as the employee. So I got married. I'm going to go out and I don't have to email anybody with, hey, I got married. What do? I just come right out to the system and I'm going to fill in this life event or go through this life event process, I should say. So this is what we're seeing here is part of the new, I don't know if it's new, but the SOHO responsive controls. I don't know if a lot of you have heard, like starting, I think in October, at least for benefits and transition management, everything has to be turned on. For those that maybe already run transition management or do things within talent acquisition, this look and feel should be familiar to you, but this is kind of this flow of information and data entering that we've got over here, and you'll see in a second how it flows. That's very that's kind of the path that Infor is taking to get everything in that similar format and flow. So I can see, okay, this is a marriage, blah blah blah, instructions. I think this was always something super fun in Lawson S3 where you had to, dig into the HTML and figure out where do I change the verbiage or instructions. Very easy in GHR, and I just put in, this note custom instructions, but it's just all part of the setup. You just go and you say XYZ, this is what my instructions are going to be. It then shows the employee their current benefits, just so they can see, okay, this is what I have today. It then shows them their current dependents and beneficiaries. So I just had that one dependent. And then it shows you a worksheet. So if I just click view worksheet, this is really just, showing me what are my options. What is the amounts? What am I paying? What's the employer paying? So at times, people might want to print this out and take it home to their spouse and talk through it. And you can certainly, as you're going through this, you can exit out of here at any time and come back in and you'll be right where you left off. So you don't have to do this all in one sitting. And then the actual enrollment itself. So typically if you get married, you're probably going to be given the option of changing your vision, your dental, your medical, etc. Oops. So, yeah, I just have it set to show medical. It's like, no, because I had already told Michelle we were going to show to Norma. But I told her, it's no different than a second, it seems kind of lagged here. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so right now I'm an associate only, but I'm going to say select benefits. Obviously, I just got married. I want to add my spouse, so I'm going to select spouse. You can see all the information's right here, so I know pretty quickly what my cost is going to be. And then I get a message that says minimum number of dependents. Well, that makes sense. I need to then enroll my spouse if I'm saying I want employee plus spouse. So I come in here. And again, hopefully this is intuitive enough that, you might have some documentation for employees about life events, but for the most part, the goal is that they can come in and just, do this stuff on their own. And there's not a lot of questions. So now I can see, here's what I've selected. You can ask for documentation. So I let's say though I forget to do this. You know, I don't know my marriage license. Let me see if I can get it through without it. You can define your events to say, nope, sorry, documentation is required. So it's a good thing, right? You can, and again, instead of emailing documentation back and forth, it can all be uploaded right here in the system. So we'll go ahead and just have a fake marriage license. Next. Now I have no more errors. It's kind of giving me a final cost summary, and I can go ahead and submit it. And then certainly on the back end, the benefits department would have to approve that life event. But once they do approve it, and I'll just go do that real quick, we can then see it in the employees' enrollments. Now, in this case, I believe the rule is set. So even though I got married on 9/18, it's my new coverage isn't going to hit until 10/1. But we can still take a look at that. So now I'm in as a benefits administrator, and I'm going to go to my life events and find, here's my James Jones, which is pending approval. So the benefits team then has the ability to review this, including reviewing the documentation itself. Maybe someone did upload just a fake document, you know, so this gives the benefit team the ability to make sure it's a valid marriage license, it makes sense, and this marriage life event is valid. So I'm just going to set that to approved. Save it. And then I'll finalize this event. And I'm doing this just so when we go back as the employee now, we will see here though, I still only see associate only because this is going to show my real-time benefits. But just for purposes of this demo, if I set my as of date ahead to when that next enrollment should start with, you know, associate plus spouse, we can now see that I am in the associate plus spouse, and I have my dependent listed down here. So just kind of want to show that, just, you know, again, show the different roles in the system, take a very quick peek at, you know, some of the benefit functionality that employees get out of, you know, this system. But again, you can see, let me click out here. You know, as an employee, there's a lot of different things that they can manage and view specifically in their profile. And like this talent profile. So once you start rolling out competencies and skills and education and things like that, you know, they can go see what's out there. They can go enter their own information. So it's all right here. It's all embedded. It's all ingrained in the actual, you know, solution itself. And it's all implemented as part of the actual system implementation. Okay. We're good. We'll leave ourselves a couple minutes for questions. Let me just final few slides here. Okay, so just want to talk real quick, you know, how can Intellius help? Certainly the consultants we have been doing this for a very long time. We've got expertise across the board in terms of functional consultants, project managers, data consultants, technical, etc. So one of the things that we help with many times is, you know, helping you with an assessment. So maybe you're thinking about going to HR Talent, you're not quite sure, you don't know what modules, etc. Certainly we can come in and kind of do a current state assessment. You know, where are your pain points? What systems are about to, you know, require another license fee? just what are your long-term goals? And we kind of, take a look at all of that. And some of the stuff we can provide you back are quick wins. Maybe there are some things you can do in your current system today to make your life a whole lot easier. But maybe there's also some things that current Lawson S3 just doesn't handle as well as HR Talent. So it would make sense to make the move. A lot of times with those assessments too, we do that road mapping, and we help you, again, back to the picture with all the boxes. It's a lot of boxes. So what's the right order? What's the right approach? We can help with all of that. And then of course, the actual implementation itself. As I mentioned before, we've got a range of consultants. We can certainly handle the full implementation, or maybe you just want help on the technical side, or maybe you just want help. You've got a really strong technical team, but you just need help designing your business processes. So really we can kind of fit and mold in, wherever is needed to help you guys. I did want to call out too, we've just welcomed 2 new HCM members to our team. So we're definitely, growing on the HCM side. One is, her name is Brittany Johnson, and she comes from a client with real life experience implementing. And she also was still at the client while they were supporting, once they were live. So she was supporting HR Talent, core GHR and benefits. And I always think that that's an awesome skill and experience to have, because many consultants, it's just the reality of it. We implement, we go on to the next. We implement, we go on to the next. So having resources that actually lived the life of a client and had to support the system brings a lot of knowledge and expertise. And then we also have Gloria. She has over 15 years of just HR experience in general. And this is across various software platforms, but one of those was Infor. But again, when we're designing things for you, or when we're coming up with business processes, just having that true HR, I lived it experience is always very, very helpful. All right. So I think then we'll end with any questions. Chandra, do we want to do this in the chat or just have people shout out their questions? If you're talking, Chandra, you're on mute.
I was. I was just saying that please do whatever makes you the most comfortable. You can either unmute yourself or use messages in the chat or the Q&A, and we will respond from there. It looks like we do have one question here. What drives the need for HR talent rebuild jobs, reporting relationship, actor organization unit, and manager chart?
Sorry, what are the need for those? Is that the question?
Yeah, the question is asking what drives the need for those.
Sure. So as you're, transferring people around the system or making changes, to your supervisor structure, different things like that, there are rebuilds that need to be run. Typically, these are scheduled to run. They're not run like dynamically right away, just to make sure that it's not bogging down the system. So we typically just, schedule these to run once an hour. And it's really just to keep the data in sync and organized as all the transactions are occurring throughout the system. Anything else?
I don't see any others. If anybody has any or anything else, shout out. Yeah. Okay. If you do, leave this webinar and have something pop up, information listed here on this slide deck, please feel free to send us an email. We're always happy to questions or set up a call to go through anything you guys might want to go through. I think with that, that covers everything for us today. Thanks so much for joining, and we look forward to helping you guys